bowling ball going back and forth in a line from you to me.
And once again, we have Marcus Allen, UK distributor for Nexus Magazine, and the author of one of the best moon hoax books in the world, the Apollo Moon Hoax: The Real Evidence by Marcus Allen and Trevor Weaver.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
Just a sec, Marcus. I'm going to do that again. What happened? I was in the middle of a. Oh, okay. Let's do that again.
All right, start again. Right, cut.
All right. I'm
Right,
going to
go.
record now, Nina. I'm recording. Marcus Allen, once again, the UK distributor for Nexus Magazine and the author of the book. Hold up the magazine first.
Right, there we go. That's the current issue of Nexus Magazine.
Yes.
That'll
I'm
be
just
out
reading
in
that right now.
Is it? Oh, hang on. No, that's the wrong one. Hang on. Hang on. Start again. Cut.
Cut.
Okay, let's go. I've got the right one now.
All right. Take 3.
Take 3. I like it.
I like it. Take 3. I love editing. Now that we're getting better at the editing, we can just edit stuff out. Okay, so here we go again. Take 3. Okay, and once again, we are having a discussion with Marcus Allen, the UK distributor for Nexus Magazine.
Wow, you got yours too.
I got my copy.
You got yours from the UK because that is out in North America.
Yeah.
At the beginning of next month. So this is a preview of what everybody can read. And if you're not reading Nexus, you're not paying attention. There's some good stuff in there, by the way, as usual.
Oh, excellent stuff. And I've been reading over the last, actually, I just caught up with some articles in the previous one. And always some good information. As I like to tell people, a lot of the information in Nexus Magazine, contrary to what the mainstream media types will tell you, a lot of it's based on real science.
Yeah,
real science.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the conditions that Duncan Rhodes, who's the editor of Nexus and the owner of it, who lives in Australia, north of Brisbane, at Mullaney, and he insists that anybody writing for Nexus produces the references they use, which is why at the end of each article, there is sometimes as much information from the references as there is in the article. So it's based on good research, real science, and it may contradict some of the more alarming stories that we hear from the mainstream. But that is the point. Nexus Magazine is alternative news. That's what it says at the top. It's an alternative news magazine.
Yeah.
Alternative to what, you might say? Alternative to the mainstream narrative. Not in all cases, because not everything is alternative. But Nexus tries to produce the information which will allow you to make more informed decisions about what is going on in the world, how to look after yourself. That's the health side of it. The history side of it, are we being told the truth about everything that's happened in our world? One question, how many people have even heard of the Younger Dryas period of history? Younger Dryas occurred about 13,000 years ago, 11,000 BC. Check it out. And if you're talking about temperatures, look at the way that the temperature plummeted at the beginning of the Younger Dryas period, and 1,000 years later, it went back up again. Nobody knows exactly why it happened, but something like that is in Nexus. We look at the sort of political side. We look at what are called conspiracies. Who built the pyramids and why? Nobody knows. But we try to come up with some potentially realistic answers to that. We don't say they're correct. This is the whole point. History evolves, science evolves. The science can never be settled on anything. If it's real science, science always evolves. Somebody will observe something going on, make predictions about it, try to find evidence to support it, and produce answers. They may not be the right answers, and that's when somebody else will come in and say, no, 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 look at this, look at that. This is the whole point of science. It's an evolving activity. It's never settled. If you ever hear somebody say the words, the science is settled, it's a politician speaking, not a scientist. Because
exactly. And now we're hearing, and I just want to go back to a point you just made in a second, but before I do, now we're hearing, and even the mainstream media is reluctantly starting to talk about political science versus actual science.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this a little bit later, but the last couple of years has really all been based on political science. Yeah. And when I say political science, I'm not talking about politics per se. I'm talking about politics version of science.
Yeah.
Right. And what how they manipulate data, and they invent and fictionalize stories to fit their agendas, and then they call it science. And then they turn around and say that what we're doing is disinformation and misinformation, when in actuality, they're the ones that are doing the disinformation and misinformation. And Marcus, I just want to go back to something. You made a very interesting point about temperature. I was reading something recently, and they were talking about climate change. And the author brought up a very good point, that after World War II, when the industrialized countries are ramping up their industries, a lot of carbon was put in the air. And of course, carbon is used to justify all these draconian rules to bring in climate change. The interesting thing about that, over a 10-year period after, I believe, World War II, if I got I believe I got the dates correct, there was no appreciable difference in temperature overall.
Yeah.
And the carbon was higher back then than it was decades since. And yet there was no appreciable difference in overall temperature over a 10-year period. And then going back 30 years, I remember when I was actually in high school, just over 40 years ago, I was in high school. And I remember watching documentaries talking about we're coming into an ice age, and it's getting colder, and we're all going to freeze, and society as we know it will never be the same. 10 years after that, then I started hearing videos about, no, it's the world is warming up. It's warming up. It's getting hot. It's getting hot. And we're not going to survive this, and we're going to run out of oil. 10 years after that, then they said, well, maybe it's not, it's not an ice age and a global warming. We'll just call it climate change. Yeah. And that's the way it's been for the last 15 or 20 years. Yeah. Right. And when you look back in especially in the 1970s, we were going to run out of oil. The population was going to be devastated. Now we've got twice the population. We've got more oil than they know what to do with. And they can't make up our minds whether it's the earth is cooling or warming. So they just call it climate change. And again, it goes back to what you were talking about with science, that it is to fit a political agenda.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Now, here's the question, which I ask everybody if I ever get to speak about climate change. What is the current level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere right now?
Good question.
It's 0.0421%.
That's precise.
Yes, it's measured in Hawaii at the meteorological station there. And it's precise because they can measure it precisely. It's the middle of the Pacific they're measuring it.
Yeah.
Now, what is not often added to that equation, because 0.041, 0.04, let's call it 0.04, it's easy. 0.04% is 400 parts per million, mathematically. And it sounds scary because it's, that's a lot of parts per million. 0.04% is not very much.
No.
And of that carbon dioxide which is being measured, how much of it is emitted by the oceans, which cover 70% of the Earth's surface? Because as temperatures increase, as the ocean temperature increases, it emits carbon dioxide. That's just standard science. You heat something up. In this case, carbon dioxide comes out. Now we hear about carbon pollution. What they're referring to is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant in any way, shape or form. It's plant food. It's what plants must have in order to enable the photosynthesis, the changing of the creation of sugars within the plants. It uses carbon dioxide to do that. Why are we deliberately trying to prevent plants from growing? It's madness, absolute madness. It's not science, it's politics. But people make a lot of money out of this because most of the population don't fully understand the carbon cycle. That's all it is. It's standard science. Now, I said it was 0.04% is the current level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. How much of that is produced by humans? And how much of that is produced naturally? And the answer is 0.04% of 0.04% is produced by humans. Of course, we produce carbon dioxide. We burn fossil fuels. One of the results of that is the production of carbon dioxide. Nothing wrong with that. Go for a drive in your car and help the plants.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Which we'll get to soon.
We'll get to that soon. Oh, there's plenty there. But the idea that there is this carbon pollution, which is carbon dioxide, which is plant food, which is produced in very small quantities by man relative to what is produced naturally from the oceans, the outgassing of the oceans. It's a fictional story. And we'll look back, our grandchildren may well look back in 100 years' time and say, what were they thinking? How could they believe this stuff? You know, it's like how man evolved from apes, allegedly.
Yeah.
The theory of evolution. Note the word theory.
Theory.
It's
never
been proven.
Yeah, and there's been a few books that some very, very good books. I know that I forget the author's name. There's a few of them anyway that have been doing some good work disputing the Big Bang theory. Before we get into that, though, I just want to go back to a point you made there about the percentage of carbon in the atmosphere. My understanding from researchers that I have been listening to who have done, a lot of work on this, the overall, if you want to put a percentage in terms of the overall contribution, and carbon dioxide's being demonized, and it shouldn't be demonized, as you said earlier, it's plant food, and we need it. And but the point that he was making is that if you want to put an overall figure, since human evolution, you want to call it evolution, we'll call it evolution for now. That let's not even call it evolution. Let's just look in the last 7-8 decades.
Yeah.
If you want to put a figure on it, the overall contribution to carbon dioxide in the air, or to climate change, as people want to call it, human contribution is less than 1%.
Yeah.
The other 99% is things we have no control over. It's a natural process.
Yeah.
And this really it gets a little annoying after a while, because people are constantly listening to, and I'm looking over there, that big square box called a TV. People are constantly looking at that and believing what they're hearing. What they want to do is they want to get us towards the system that they have in China and the social credit system that they have there. Yet the irony is that China doesn't follow any climate rules, because they're already there, so they just do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
But they're using that here to get us to there, to get us to a China-type credit social system, which is really what this is all about. This is what's driving this climate change narrative in the media, but it's breaking down.
It's breaking down. I'm seeing it all the time. I mean, I watch a bit of social media, not a great deal, and I see the ridiculous stories that people perpetrate on social media about, oh, the world is burning up, with a picture of some forest fire. Of course there's forest fires. Of course there are. wildfires in Australia. There are bushfires in Australia, wildfires in America. We've even got a few in the UK. We're not going to be left out of this. Most of them are started by lightning strikes, arson, uncleared undergrowth is the fuel that creates it. You know, if you've got people, and I think in the last bushfire season in Australia, about 170 people were arrested for arson, i.e. starting fires deliberately, because they like to see the fire engines arrive, and they like to see the aeroplanes dropping their water.
Yeah.
I mean, these people should be prosecuted.
Yes.
For damaging the environment. That's all they're doing. Why is it so hard to grasp that of course wildfires are a natural occurrence. It's nature's way of clearing out the rubbish.
Yeah.
But if you don't clear out the rubbish, the fire gets much worse. And in Australia, houses are designed specifically to prevent them catching fire. That's why they're made out of metal. And most house fires, unless it's a really powerful blaze, are the entry into the house through ventilation vents of burning embers. If you close those vents off, the embers can't get into the house. A bushfire will normally move quite fast. Mm-hmm. The trouble is the animals can't get out of the way fast enough. So bushfires and wildfires, they're quite a natural part of nature. It's nature clearing out the rubbish. Well, if we do the job for it and clear out our own rubbish, we'll have less of them. Unless you get idiots going around with lighters and starting fires.
And let's not forget too that there is some talk. I won't say evidence right now, but there is some talk of technology being used to further that so-called crisis of forest fires. To again, because you notice every time there's a forest fire in California, you hear it all the time, and it's been a natural occurrence that's been happening for thousands of years. But you know, when they talk about it now, it's always under the guise of climate change. It always leads to climate change. And, you know, there is technology. I mean, the Soviets are on record and have patents of weather modification technology. So it's not without the realm of possibility that these fires are being manipulated to further, again, a political agenda.
Yeah, it's a political agenda because a lot of people are making a lot of money out of climate change.
Yeah.
Whether they're academics researching the subject in universities across the world, whether it's companies producing evidence to show that the products of the oil and gas industry is harming the planet. There's a lot of money in it. And that's how people sometimes make their living. But it doesn't mean to say they're right.
No.
And it's necessary to ask the awkward question, which is what I try to do. Ask the awkward questions. Why is it so difficult to grasp that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant? We breathe it out all the time. Mm-hmm. We pump it into huge greenhouses to encourage plant growth. Well, that's what carbon dioxide does. It encourages plant growth. And farmers know that. They buy their carbon dioxide, they pump it into the greenhouse, they get good crops, they get good yield, and they got good profits from selling it. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. You know, this idea that carbon dioxide must be eliminated by building electric cars. Oh, come on, guys, get a life. Where do you get the electricity to charge them from? Power stations. What do power stations use? Oil, gas, and coal. Windmills just don't cut it. Solar panels don't work at night. Surprise, surprise. Windmills only work when the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
We have no means of storing the electricity they produce.
Yeah.
So it's so much complete rubbish, and yet people are invested in this, and they go around saying the world is burning. We've got to stop climate change.
Yeah.
No, you haven't got to stop climate change. You've got to encourage it.
Yes.
Because our Earth spins around the sun. It has a tilt. which varies by about 1 degree over several thousand years. Occasionally, the Earth gets a little bit closer to the sun. Guess what? It'll get hotter.
Yeah.
Occasionally, the Earth and its orbit will move a little bit away from the sun. Guess what? It gets colder. It's not rocket science. It's basic observational astronomy. It's basic observational science. It's been done for hundreds of years. So this ridiculous idea that climate change is somehow an existential threat to humanity is just arrant nonsense, perpetrated by people who don't know what they're talking about. I'm looking at you, Al Gore, here.
Yeah. Inconvenient truth. Inconvenient. An inconvenient annoyance, actually. You know, interesting enough, there is a couple of researchers that believe that there's an ice age coming in. Now, ice ages have happened before. The reasoning being that the sun is going through a solar minimum right now for the next 15 to 20 years. Now, if that's the case, and we have an ice age coming in, all the more reason why we should be using the resources that we have, for example, oil, coal, and whatever that transfers into, you know, diesel and all the more reason why we should be using what planet Earth is providing us in terms of its resources. And this whole thing about oil being fossil fuels is now under suspicion as well. I mean, I've read reports where oil wells have mysteriously replenished themselves.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's going on there? Is it maybe oil is self-producing, or the Earth is producing it in abundance? You know, another possibility. I mean, there are all sorts of other theories. I admit that it's a theory, but this fossil fuel theory that it's based on fossil fuels is kind of like what you just mentioned earlier, the Darwinian theory of evolution. Well, there's people have been poking some holes in that because it doesn't seem to add up.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned fossil fuels. Where did the term fossil fuel originate from? Why do we refer to it as fossil, which is obviously old?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking dinosaurs, that kind of thing. You know, that's sort of where I'm thinking the narrative came from.
It was originated by John D. Rockefeller.
That name again keeps popping up, doesn't it?
Yes. The originator, whose company Standard Oil became Esso, Standard Oil, became Exxon, and now ExxonMobil, the two joined together. He decided that would be a good term for this black crude oil coming out of the earth, because it implied it was very old, as you say. Was it old dinosaurs? Well, the dinosaurs died out, we're told, 66 million years ago. So the implication being it's very old, hence fossil. Yeah, some of it may well be old dinosaurs, but most of it, guess what the dinosaurs lived on? What did they eat? What did the dinosaurs use as food?
I'm assuming plants.
Plants. How did plants grow? Carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
So dinosaurs live.
All part of the cycle of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Part of the cycle of life. So the idea that fossil fuels are somehow crushed dinosaurs, well, maybe some of them, I don't know. There may be vegetation that would produce gas.
Yeah.
And then we have this new technology that came along. Well, it's not new. It was actually known about for many years, called fracking.
Yeah.
Hydraulic fracturing. And that has been developed in the last 20 years to be able to do horizontal drilling. And we produce this incredible supply of natural gas, and in some cases oil as well, from the technology of fracking. And people will say, oh, you hold their hands up, say, oh no, fracking is dangerous, you know, it'll contaminate the water supply. No, it doesn't. Those films were, the film of water being ignited was produced by a guy called Fox, I think, in at the time that fracking was being encouraged in Pennsylvania, the Bracken deposits,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that water was contaminated with gas is as old as the hills. It's been known about for a long, long time. People in that area knew that because the gas was relatively close to the surface,
Yeah.
it got into the water supply. And if you want to really, a nice party trick, turn the tap on, put a lighter on it, it gets into flames. It's great. But that's the only place it's ever happened. And it was known to happen in there. So the idea that fracking contaminates the water supply is complete nonsense.
Well, not only that, but they've really been trying to demonize fracking in the last decade, saying, well, it can lead to other things too, like earthquakes. Earthquakes usually happen miles below the surface.
Yeah.
Like 250, 300 miles more. I mean, it's deep.
Yeah.
And fracking, we can't go down more than, I think, what's the limit? I think it's 8 miles or something like that.
Yeah.
8 statute miles. Something. It's a very small figure. So again, just people use your common sense. How far down does fracking actually go? Less than a mile, half a mile. And that's supposed to be causing earthquakes. I'm not sure about that.
Well, it may well cause a few tremors in the ground. It's been
in a local area.
Yeah, it's been likened to a heavy lorry driving past your house. You could feel it.
Yeah.
Because, a 40-ton truck full of soil, and it's a bumpy road. Yeah, you can feel it, but that's all you can. It's like,
well, look.
It's been likened to dropping your shopping bag on the floor when you come home.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a tremor, but does it harm anything?
Exactly. I mean, and two, look what's happening with the overall agenda with climate change. Look what's happening to countries around the world that have adopted these very stringent climate change policies. Sri Lanka is one good example. I think it's the most recent example. And now Argentina, and I think, Holland, look what's happening in Holland, with these climate change policies. The good thing about it is it's leading to a major political upheaval.
Yeah.
And people are finally saying, enough. We're done with this.
Yeah.
We're absolutely done with this. The great comedian George Carlin, the late great comedian George Carlin, often joked about this whole climate change business. And he said, did it ever occur to you that maybe we humans were put here to make plastic?
Yeah.
I mean, start thinking. And that's what he was trying to get people to do, is to start thinking, right? But one good thing about climate change, and I'll say this, and is that it is opening people's eyes, and it is leading to the narrative being the narrative breaking down, which I think is going to end to political upheaval, as I just mentioned earlier. Yeah. That is good.
Yes, it is, and that's necessary. Yeah, George Carlin, worth checking him out. He's got some wonderful comedy sketches, which he does. I mean, basically, he was a comedian,
Smart one.
A political comedian.
Yeah.
And the famous quote that I remember from him is that it's a big club out there and you're not in it. Implying that there's a lot of things going on that you've got no control over. But yeah, George Carlin, he's very Carlin, George Carlin.
Yeah.
Worth checking him out.
He was talking about one of it, not recently, he's been gone for a while, but one of his videos I was watching recently, he was talking about how, as you said, they use all kinds of techniques, including climate change, to control you. And so what they do is they have 3 classes of people. You have the poor people, the homeless people, you have the middle class, and then you have the super elites, the 1% with all the money and all the wealth. And he says, but they make sure that you do not get to that level of wealth, to the 1%. And then, just as a reminder where you could actually be, you look right and you see the homeless person, and that's just to remind you what happens to you if you don't toe the line.
Yeah.
Right. And the way I'm not a comedian, so I'm not trying to mimic George Carlin. You have to watch him because he's a genius. He's a comic genius, and he just put it all together. And it's the way he says it, just to remind you what can happen if you don't toe the line. You're going to be on the streets.
Yeah.
Your love's just like a wrecking ball going back and forth in a line.